Alright, I've been using Ableton for years now, and it is one of my favorite DAWs, and one of the reasons for that is because of the tool set and what it allows you to do. One of my favorite tools within Ableton is the Ableton Drum Rack. The functionality inside that allows you to not only stay in your creative zone for longer, but for you to be extremely efficient as well. I'm gonna kind of break it down in this video. So check this out. Let's start breaking down some of these Ableton Drum Rack features. Each pad in a drum rack is able to hold multiple samples, but we have to set it up a certain way. If we go ahead and drop in a drum rack here in one of these MIDI channels, and we'll go ahead and drop a sample into any of these pads. We'll drop a snare into this one. And when we do that, you can immediately see that it loads up in a sampler. For the function that we need, we actually need to make this into a sampler, and there's an easy way to do that. Just go ahead and click on the title bar there, right click, and hit simpler to sampler on the bottom there, and that'll convert that simpler to a sampler. And right there, there's the function that we want, the zone function. And if we click on that, we can see our sample right here. This is the cool part. We can actually drop in multiple samples into this one drum pad there. Okay, so this takes us to feature number 2, which is that you are able to actually map this blue selector at the top of the select editor to one of the macro controls in the drum rack. Really simple. If you know the basics of mapping in Ableton, you can hit map on the drum rack there, and you'll see that green bar light up, and that means that you can actually click on the selector there and map it to one of these knobs. This is going to be snare select. With this knob, we can now change the values and in effect change which snare is playing. If you notice, if we trigger that snare, what's happening is both snares here are actually playing at the same time. So this is snare 1 by itself, this one is snare 2 by itself, and combined it's making that. But that'd be really cool for snare layering, but we're not trying to do that. We're trying to cycle through each snare, and that is actually what these 3 buttons essentially allow you to do. Each one does different functions, but the one that we want is this SEL, which is the select editor. What this editor does, it allows you to define and edit the sample zone of each sample layer. These 2 are considered sample layers, and so what we can do is change these values, and this little blue selector bar at the top actually allows you to go through those values and choose the sample that you want. So from 0 to 15, it's going to play the first snare, and 16 and up, it's going to play the second snare. You can even make this a single value, and it'll play that snare. Anything outside that value will play something different. Basically meaning that you can have 128 samples in one drum pad, which is really awesome. One more useful little tip is if you right click in that select editor and hit distribute ranges equally, it'll distribute the ranges equally dependent on how many samples you have. This leads us nicely into feature number 3. Utilizing these tools, you can then cycle through different drum kits within a single drum rack. So I'm building out this drum rack right now, and you can see we have that same selector knob there, but what you might notice is that when I move this knob, it's actually moving all of these knobs here because I have these macro controls all mapped to this single macro control in a separate group. That allows me to cycle between different drum kits within this single drum rack. So for example, at this point, all of the features kind of start to overlap with each other. But another feature that you can do is you can actually add control over different parameters within the drum racks. I have 3 groups in total here, and this group is controlling all of the drums. This group is controlling the single drum sample categories, and inside that group we actually have more fine control over the kick select, snare select, hi-hat select, as well as really useful functions that I know I might want for each of these different samples. For example, if I have a kit that has a little too much high end, I have a low pass filter already mapped, and that is actually coming from, if we go into the sampler here and into filters, I mapped this filter to this knob by hitting map on that specific group, and you're able to select the frequency there, and that is what's actually changing to give me a low pass filter. And I went ahead and did that for different parameters, such as the low pass filter's resonance. I have this one still open, that macro 4, and I went ahead and mapped the attack, which you can see changing on the right there, the sustain, decay, and of course, really useful, the volume. And the volume is actually, you can map it right here from the sampler. All of these I just found to be really useful for the sample. So it might be a little different depending on what sample you're using it for. For example, the snares, you know, I might not want to mess around too much with a low pass filter. Maybe I want a high pass filter. So I went ahead and made this macro 4 to be a filter select, which essentially changes the function and gives me a little more range in terms of real quick on the fly sound design. You might be able to find different uses depending on how you decide to use these features and creating your own drum racks. And another feature that is really cool with the Ableton Drum Racks is the fact that you can add multiple groups to have more macro controls available for your drum rack. Basically, I went ahead, I'm building out this lo-fi ultimate drum rack right here. All of these macro controls are mapped, and I actually have them mapped to this group right here. And if we open it up, you can see all of these are mapped to this single macro control. And in effect, that actually allows me to cycle between different drum kits within a single drum rack. You can do this over and over and over again. That's the power of you know, these groups and the Ableton Drum Racks. If we click Command G, we can actually make another group with another set of macro controls, and you can just literally keep on going to your heart's content. Another nice little feature when utilizing the Ableton Drum Racks is that you can actually add effects to either the whole drum rack or individual pads. If I am here on my lo-fi snares, within that group, you can actually see that I have on all of the snares, I have this EQ, delay, and this reverb automatically loaded in because I know that sometimes I might want this sort of reverb to get an idea, or a sort of delay or a specific EQ. And you know, you can actually have some fine control if you already know what plugins you like to use. Definitely wouldn't overlook that very simple feature right there. Another awesome feature when working with the Ableton Drum Racks is the fact that you can set up send and return chains within the drum rack itself. So for example, if we go into one of these groups, and I want to pick this group here, and we open that chain list, here you'll see all of our drum pads listed here with the volume and pan selection. And what we want to do is go over here to these 3 buttons. These 2 here, the S and the R, is send and return. Once we set up a return track, the send will enable. So if we hit return, that'll open this box up right underneath the drum pads and we can drop in our audio effect. So let's say we wanted to add some reverb. We can drop in a reverb here. And now you'll see that we have the send button. And if we click the send button, that will now enable the sends for each of the drum pads. Let's say, for example, our snare, we want a little reverb on it because that's what it's sounding like. We can increase the send. And now we have reverb all within the drum rack. So you can really set the vibe inside your drum rack, and right when you load it in, you have all of these tools available at your disposal. At your disposal. Words, bruh. I know I went through this information pretty quickly and I kind of just gave you the basics of working with these drum racks, but I really hope that you can pull something from this and start to create your own ideas. So many different ideas and ways that you can approach it. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with, and share it with me if you do end up doing something, because I'd really like to see what you guys come up with. And I'm planning on doing more videos soon on kind of just setting up the entire thing step by step by step. So if you're interested in seeing those, definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing those pretty soon. Hit that bell button too if you do want to be notified. More than anything, if you got anything out of this video, hit that like button, man. I would really appreciate it, and I know it goes a long way. I appreciate you guys checking this out and taking the time to learn something with me. My name's Intempus. I'll catch you guys later.